Right. Halkha Psuka, fourth Friday of Parashat Ki Tetzeh. הקורע כדי לתפור שתי תפירות ועל מנת לתפור שתי תפירות חייב. A person who tears, for instance, he tears a piece of clothing, a piece of material, לתפור שתי תפירות, the amount that would be sufficient to sew 2 stitches, ועל מנת לתפור שתי תפירות, and in order to sew 2 stitches, חייב. He would be chayav, he would be liable for doing a transgression of Shabbat. Aval hakorea le'afsid, but a person who tears in order to destroy, without any constructive purpose, patur, is exempt mipnei shehu mikalkel, because he's just destroying. Not to go and start tearing things with no problem, but when is he liable for the one of the 39 melachot of Shabbat? Only if when he did something that has a constructive purpose. Even when tearing, you would have to have a constructive purpose, like he was going to sew 2 stitches, and the amount that he tore is enough to sew 2 stitches, then he would be chayav, he would be liable. Hakorea bahamato, if somebody tears in his anger, or alamet, or he did kreah, he rendered the garment, he tore a garment, alamet, because of a close relative who passed away. Shu chayav likroa alav, one of the 7 relatives that a person has the obligation to tear a garment over. Chayav, then he would be liable for a transgression of Shabbat. Why? Because he's putting at ease his mind, whether it's his anger or he's feeling that he needs to tear, so that anger subsides. So there was a constructive, so to speak, purpose to that tearing. And since his anger is sort of put to rest, through this tearing, then the tearing is like as if he was doing something constructive, that had a constructive purpose. They had a result that was not just plain destroying, and that's why he would be liable for a transgression of Shabbat. If a person opened the opening for the neck, let's say a poncho, you have like a piece of cloth, and you make a hole in the middle of it and put it over your head, so that you've done a tear that had a constructive purpose. That had a constructive purpose, and therefore that tear makes the person liable, even if he was not going to stitch it. It had a constructive purpose for creating an opening for the neck, and that's why he would be liable for a transgression of Shabbat. המדבק נערות או אורות בקולן של סופרים וכיוצא בו. A person who glues together papers or orot or leather בקולן של סופרים, with a type of glue that scribes used to use, I guess book binders they used to use, and that type of thing, or any type of glue. הרי זה תולדת תופר וחייב. This is a subcategory of sewing, because sewing is not allowed on Shabbat. It's one of the transgressions. And right, it's one of the melachot, and it's one of the melachot of Shabbat, one of the 39 transgressions, different categories of transgression of Shabbat. So when a person didn't sew but actually glued together, that's a subcategory of sewing, and that's also a transgression that a person would be liable for on Shabbat. וכן המפרק נערות דבוקין או אורות דבוקין ולא נתכוון לקלקל בלבד. Also a person who tears apart, who takes apart pieces of paper that are glued together or leather that is glued together, and his purpose, his intention is not to destroy, but rather he had some constructive purpose for doing that separating. הרי זה תולדת קורע וחייב. That is one of the subcategories of tearing, because it had a constructive purpose, and therefore he would be liable for that action.